Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this informational meeting and discussion. We're a group of Takoma Park residents from both the DC and the Maryland sides of Takoma Park who've organized ourselves around the issue of the proposed development of the Takoma Metro site. We're supported in our efforts by Historic Takoma, Inc. and Takoma Stormwater Solutions. Well, welcome. As people are coming in, welcome. We are going to get started at 7, but it's great to see folks showing up already. Looking forward to a good discussion tonight. Our goal tonight is to provide us all with a better understanding of the proposed development and to consider what steps we all can take to ensure that the building project is done right. My name is Jennifer Martin, and I serve on the board of Historic Takoma. There we go.
Yeah.
Let's see, and the light is, I had a ring light and it died. Tonight, Peter Fiden and I will be presenting some background before we hold a discussion to hear your questions and ideas. Please know that our group has many questions as the planning process is neither very transparent nor is our information complete. We do know, however, that it's crucial that our communities on both sides of the Maryland-DC line be given a voice as decisions are made about what to do with the property. Our hope is that by the end of this meeting, all of us are going to have a better sense of the issues and how to become engaged. Our group believes the EYA plan for development of the Takoma site requires more study and significant modification. We have had past success working with developers to design their projects to fit the community in terms of style and size. For example, the Takoma Central building, which houses busboys, was reduced in height, and the developer of the apartments behind the CVS worked with us to create an attractive design. So far, however, the lack of transparency on the EYA project at the Takoma Metro is a cause for serious concern. You can see here, the Takoma site was created in the 1970s through the public purchase of private land to establish a transit center in Takoma to serve the new Metro rail system. We want to make it clear, we're in favor of appropriate development for the WMATA land. We're not anti-development. However, we don't agree that developers should be able to build whatever the heck they want. Any new development should be scaled and designed to reflect the character of the surrounding commercial district and residential neighborhood, and it should include truly affordable housing. We need the Takoma Station to be high functioning for all modes of transit, including rail, buses, cars, bikes, and pedestrians. The plan must ensure the station meet our needs, not only today, but also years down the road. That was the point of having the purchase of that land back in the 70s. And finally, any new construction should occur only after consideration of the impacts on the environment. Next. I'm going to turn things over to Peter now.
Okay. Let me just give you a background as to the site to begin with and define it. Some don't know it that well, or that don't know the actual boundaries of it. It consists of 7 acres, and it is bordered by cedar in the district from the underpass, and then where it turns left at the old 7-Eleven, and then you turn left again and follow Eastern Avenue all the way to the Garden Apartments. The far side of it is bounded obviously by the embankment. Notably, it includes the smaller green space that's between the parking area and the Garden Apartments, in addition to sort of a buffer back behind the parking. Okay. The Metro development site sits in the historic district of the District of Columbia, and it faces residents in the historic district of DC and Maryland. We note here that the design of the project should be comparable to the surrounding residential and commercial buildings, which are 3 to 5 stories. For example, the apartment buildings on Eastern Avenue and the houses on Cedar Street. These are shown To the right, those are the first set of garden apartments. Those two houses shown are the two on Cedar Street that are actually in the district. And you can see there the edge of the 7-Eleven building. See? Next. Three nearby buildings are the Takoma Central building where Busboys is. To the right at the top is the Elevation 314 building, I think it's called, which is 4 stories and has Supergirl on first floor. And below that is a newer building behind the CVS, between Willow and Maple. Okay. 2 other buildings are noted here. One is the Arbor at Takoma, which is the old 7-Eleven. And the second one below it is the Entwine building, which was just completed at Vine and Maple. Okay. Let's go back one, if we could. All right, let me point out here some similarities in all of these buildings that we just pointed out. First of all, they all are in the 3 to 5 story height bracket. Secondly, they all have first floor commercial with the exception of the one behind the CVS. Another similarity is they all have underground parking, again, with the exception of the building behind the CVS. These are some commonalities in all the development that has happened along the commercial corridor and along Blair Road on the other side of the railroad, where there's a scale that's evolved over the years and a particular style of development that seems to be compliant and seems to work with the community. That is, it's a certain height, a certain style of use, and a certain way to address parking issues. This has worked. This scale of development has worked for developers, as witnessed by continued development. Obviously, the profit motive is working well. There are 3 buildings going up right now. It has worked well for commerce. The commercial spaces are full. They seem to be thriving. They're providing important goods and services to the community. It's working for residents. The apartments, in some cases condominiums, are generally full. People seem to be happy. And they're using the services that are available, and many are relying on Metro. It seems to be working for the broader community in that these developments merge well aesthetically and in terms of scale with the existing development on both sides of the commercial corridor and on both sides of the jurisdictional line, that is in DC and in Maryland. Okay.
All right, are you ready for me to move on?
I thought I was going to take this one. But...
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thought we had done all your slides.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So here is a rendering of the proposed development at the Metro site. This is a view that's taken as if you were standing tall behind Eastern Avenue, which is in the foreground. Cedar Street is on the left, and the parking entrance, which is about where the current parking and bus entrance, which is about where the current parking entrance is in the foreground on the right-hand side. And a piece of the garden apartment is shown to the right. You can see from this various things, including the fact that the height of the building is 7 stories at the top of the hill, and it becomes 8 stories at the low point. What you're seeing is largely the residential part of it. and the part that has a darker rendering around the corner where you can just see a bit of it has first floor commercial. Notably, you can see a car pulling in. That is the lower of 2 levels of above ground parking. You heard that correctly. The first 2 floors of this building are parking. Nothing else in Takoma Park has this. It's a mode of construction that is dated. You find a few odd buildings, a big apartment building in downtown Silver Spring from the 60s. Off of Fenton has this, an odd building in Friendship Heights. This is not something that is common today whatsoever, particularly in a high value property where there's a premium based on a lower profile, not a higher profile for a building. Okay, the next one. This is a comparison of this building to some others, 2 of which have been mentioned. First of all, talking further about the proposed building, the height is 90 feet at the highest point, that is with the low point of the land, 76 at the high point of the land. This does not include 18 feet of additional roof structures for air conditioning equipment, elevator equipment, and so forth. Total height of the building, therefore, is as high as 108 feet. Even though its legal height for zoning purposes is 76 feet. And you'll see that number in the information about the project. It's 495,000 square feet in floor area. That's equal to over 11 acres of floor area, 430 to 440 housing units, 18,000 square feet of commercial, and 230 parking spaces. 163, I believe, are dedicated to residents of the building, and 67, I believe, are designated for retail purposes. People who are coming to shop or to eat in the restaurants and so forth. Next to it is the Arbor, the building. Let's go back just a second. They're a little bit harder to see. The Arbor, the 7-Eleven building, 55 feet tall, and Takoma Central, 40 to 50 feet tall. And of course, at the far right is the Katie Lee. It says here 25 to 30 feet. It's probably more like 30 to 40 feet, but in any case, it's a smaller residential building that large as a residential building, but a much smaller building, and many people are familiar with it. Okay, next one. Another way to get a grip on the scale of the project is to put in context of what is considered to be the bulkiest building in Takoma Park, and certainly nobody's favorite. It's the Takoma Business Center at the corner of, that would be Willow and Carroll Avenue, which is 10 feet tall, approximately 110 feet in height. So pretty close to the same height as part of the new development. And we put together an interesting rendering below, putting 5 Takoma business centers side by side, and the square footage of all that, the floor area square footage of all that would still be shy of what's contemplated on this site now. Next one. The site currently has roughly 53% of permeable surface, or what we might call green space. The redevelopment of the site will reduce that to somewhere around 25, 26%, as best we can tell. The site is about half green space. Okay, next one. A number of things are proposed for the site in the context of the development to make it function. These include a new traffic signal at the current entrance to the bus bays, which that entrance is essentially where it is now, but it will go parallel to the metro track rather than veer out toward Eastern Avenue. Second major change is a new access point from Cedar opposite the 7-Eleven, about halfway down to Eastern. This is to service one level of the parking, one level of the higher level of the above ground parking. It's also an entry level for trucks to service the building and, importantly, the commercial activity. There are some concerns with this. It's a classic mixing of too much stuff on too small a piece of land. There's an excessive mixing of cars, buses, and pedestrians that we consider to be dangerous. There's no plan on how to manage traffic within the limited capacity of existing narrow streets nearby, none of which can be expanded. No lanes can be added. Rights of way are narrow. There's very, very little, if anything, that can be done, such as creating turn lanes and so forth, in the confines of Takoma, DC, Takoma Park, Maryland. Earlier traffic studies, these studies are 5 to 10 years old now, confirm that several of the intersections are already failing. By failing, it means that a light, traffic doesn't clear a light in one cycle of the traffic light. This is true at rush hour for a number of intersections. It can even happen at some of the intersections during non-rush hour times. Clearly, there's a need for a traffic study that's comprehensive, that takes into account the totality of the effects of the development in the context of other development that has happened in recent years and that is on the drawing books or coming out of the ground. Next. Okay, couple principles. Historic Takoma and Stormwater Solutions supports providing affordable housing to accommodate families and individuals. We seek to protect future affordability. Some information on the proposal. EYA in their proposal states that they will provide 15% of the gross residential square footage for affordable housing, which in the district means housing for those with a median income of up to 60% of the, I'm sorry, let me say it again. In the district, that refers to a tenant whose family income is less than 60% of the median family income for rental units. EYA states that of this 15%, 12% will be at the 60% median family income, and they will go out of their way to ensure that 3% will be at the 30% of median family income, so a lower income cohort. This, of course, leaves 70 units that would be at market rate. EYA states that it has applied for a tax abatement from the DC Department of Housing and Community Development, and if granted, it could increase the the percentage of units higher and potentially as high as 33% of residential gross floor area committed to affordable units. Just for a little context, in the district, their inclusionary zoning ordinance requires that this building have at least 10% of residential gross square footage dedicated to affordable housing, as I defined it earlier. However, in a project of this scale, and particularly one where they are proceeding with a plan unit development approach, typically to have such a project approved by the zoning commission, they would expect to see more than the 10% minimum. Okay, next. Parking. The proposal eliminates all daily parking, all hourly parking, and all handicap parking. As a little bit of background, this parking lot has been here since Metro was created in the late 1970s, or as the Metro Station opened. Contrary to some of the rhetoric in this proposal and from our neighbors, some neighbors, this parking lot, even with Metro ridership still hovering at somewhere around 50% of pre-COVID usage, but growing, the parking lot is already filling up at midday. So anything you hear about this parking lot being underused is inaccurate. Instead of parking for Metro riders, handicap, daily, and hourly, the project proposes to produce 230 parking spaces for, as I noted, residents of the new building and commercial activity. Now, begs the question, what's going to happen to those who would want to park at this parking lot? The proposal from EYA, and apparently endorsed by Metro, in fact, it is Metro's proposal, I believe. Those who want to park would be directed to go to Fort Totten to park. This is problematic for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a 15-minute drive to Fort Totten from Takoma during rush hour, 10 minutes in non-rush hour, we'll say. There aren't enough parking spaces available at Fort Totten to accommodate the 150 capacity who park at Takoma. Even if you were to stay with Metro, nonetheless, it's not clear that that's a great solution. You're creating more congestion and more pollution. It's not an environmentally friendly policy. Furthermore, the basic tenet of a transit system is to capture your riders further out, not closer in. It makes it worse for commuters, and it makes it worse for Metro. Metro should want to capture its riders further out for revenue and for efficiency purposes. Okay, next. As the project moves forward, we and others have concerns that the project be developed, whatever the project is in the end, whatever its scale, whatever its height, so forth, according to the best modern environmental standards. We want to ensure stormwater quality and quantity is managed to protect residences and infrastructure. And by the way, all of the stormwater leaves the property, crosses Eastern Avenue, runs right down through Takoma Park, and ends up in Sligo Creek. The sanitary line as well crosses Eastern Avenue, runs down through a separate pipe in the valley between Holly and Cedar, and also ends down not in the creek, but in the sanitary sewer line that parallels the creek. I don't begrudge the project for this, but I think it is a useful fact that the impacts and the residue of the project are largely, almost entirely Maryland's, and more specifically Takoma Park's. Another concern is to protect pervious green space as much as possible, and mature trees and heritage trees, of which I think there are 3 on the site. Ensure that the building height and mass allows sunlight access for surrounding homes, ensure air quality is not compromised, and also ensures that the building is built with renewable and or sustainable energy to the extent possible. The two pictures here on the right, the first one is an example that EYA produced of how they would or might possibly hide the parking. This would be necessary because the building's first 2 stories at one end and first story at the high end of the ground is parking. And that's not a very pretty sight. Second slide below shows, I guess it didn't actually come out in this picture, a bioretention system. They've proposed bioretention systems. We would, of course, want to work with them to ensure that they're doing something more than the minimum required for the site. Okay, next slide. Next steps. There's a series of things have to happen for this project to go forward. And I'll take them not in the order they're shown here, but in the order of urgency. The first is that WMATA has initiated the process several months ago to dispose of any responsibility to provide parking for transit users at this site. To do that, they have to go through a special process because it's a multi-jurisdictional body, and it is in some ways beholden to the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA. They had a public hearing on this, and there was a lot of opposition to the end of parking here. There were some, though, who supported that because they saw it as neither or, development or parking. And as an aside, I think that reflects a long tradition in this project of people believing that you're either for or against the project full stop, rather than some nice sweet spot of a compromise for different interests, different concerns, different uses of the land. The staff report came out just a week ago, not surprisingly endorsing the change, and that recommendation now goes to the WMATA board. When and if they approve it, essentially green lights the development process as far as WMATA is concerned, and basically enables the developer to go forward and get their approval in the city as if this is just any other piece of private property. The deadline for comment on that final report happens to be tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We have links that are going to come up on both the report and on how to comment on the report. The second process to note is that the Zoning Commission has scheduled their hearing on this project for June 15th. This is, I think, based on the presumption that WMATA will by then approve the sale of the property and the demise of the parking. That link is also going to be posted. What's important to note about that, the legalities of this, is that to develop this property at the scale they want, the property has to be rezoned to what's called an MU5A zone. That's called medium density mixed use. It's basically what it's referred to as. Currently, the site, just to get into this a little bit, has 3 different zones. They're all kind of reflect the old use of the property, some of which was single-family houses. on Eastern Avenue, some of which was commercial near the underpass, and some of which might have been light industrial right near the railroad, particularly when it was at grade. So there is a logic in consolidating them under one zone, but the zone they're pushing for, medium density mixed use, is a denser zoning than exists elsewhere, and one that allows taller buildings. Furthermore, as big projects like this are often done, it's being processed as a plan unit development. Plan unit developments are considered to be creative ways to create flexibility for developers, and in the best of circumstances, it leads to better development. However, in this case, it's being used, as it sometimes is used as well, to create a bigger development. Under the zoning that they're applying for, the maximum height is 65 feet. As a plan unit development, the maximum height is 90 feet. So that's essentially why they want to develop this, I would think, as a plan unit development. As a plan unit development, though, the hearing before the zoning commission becomes a hearing to do two things: to rezone the property and to approve the development. And as a plan unit development, they have if it's approved, they are within the height restriction of the MU5A zone. In the process of getting a plan unit development approved, the developer submits themselves to further scrutiny, further public participation in commenting on the project, and they're held to a higher standard of supposedly providing the community a better deal, you might say, or a better project with some community benefits, while not creating any further harm to the community. This is certainly a case where one could question that, because the larger bulk creates an aesthetic problem with the balance of the community, first of all. And secondly, the traffic that's created by it certainly could create a hardship given the limited capacity of the roads. The third piece of approval is from the Historic Preservation Review Board, which has more of an advisory ability rather than the power of the zoning commission, or in this case, the power of WMATA. The Historic Preservation Review Board, that's the district's Historic Preservation Board, will review the project in May or perhaps June. We don't know at this point. Okay, I'll just leave it there, and looking forward to various questions. Jennifer?
All right. Yeah, so now maybe Elizabeth Thornhill, if you could help us by sharing some of the issues raised in the chat, that would be great. Thank you, Peter, for a clear explanation too of what some of the issues are that we're facing. Elizabeth is muted. We need Elizabeth to be unmuted.
Yeah,
There
okay.
we go.
I'm in a meeting. Okay, I'm going to try and categorize a few, so group them together. We have some questions about where is the data. First, for the public's community satisfaction surveys, anything like that, and also about parking. Is there any data?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, please, Peter.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me take the second one first. On the parking data, you'll see that in the staff report by WMATA, that the link of that is posted. It's very confusing and I think highly suspect. There are two problems. First of all, it's confusing because they could persistently refer to the entire parking lot as a kiss and ride lot only. So their terminology is all over the place, and we pointed this out to them, and they have never corrected it. And personally, I think their reference to that in the posters announcing the hearing had the effect of suppressing participation because people couldn't understand that this affected them, since everybody parking the lot is not a kiss and ride, drop-off person, obviously. The second thing is, I think most of their data came from their parking meter system. You can pay at a central payment site. It's a modern system. You can pay a central payment site where you enter your parking space, and you can pay on your phone. And I think all their data comes from whoever operates that system. I think it's all contracted out. However, if people don't get ticketed, the tendency is to pay less and less frequently. And I haven't seen tickets on any cars there in over a year. So I really wonder, I suspect that whatever data they have is a severe undercount. Yeah.
Okay.
Second thing, on other surveys, I'm not aware of others beyond that. There were surveys online in the context of parking, but I can't remember exactly what they asked.
Peter, could you speak to the counts that you have actually done on the parking?
Yeah, we've been finding that midday, at the height of parking midday during the middle of the week, that's Tuesday through Thursday, the parking lot tends to be about 90 to 100% full. Some days people actually circle in vain and leave. The parking is now 150 spaces, almost all of them can be used for daily parking. About 15 or so are held aside for only hourly parking. And there are 6 handicap spaces. So virtually all of those are gone midweek in the core of the day.
One more question related to parking. Someone asked about the underground water, possibility of Brashear's Run, and if this could be a reason that you couldn't have underground parking.
I've never heard that, and I can't believe that that can actually be true. It may be true that there are some subsurface characteristics that could make it somewhat more expensive to build underground parking, but I'm troubled to believe that I mean, they seem to be able to build underground parking virtually anywhere if they're forced to do it. Above ground parking, I presume, is cheaper, but it's really a stark fact that they've never proposed to do that.
Another question on a different subject. Someone asked, is the design the final approved design for the site?
No. The designs that exist now are renderings from other examples of other buildings. The outline of the building is probably very close to final. That is its footprint, its height, those kinds of things, but the internal layout, probably not. And we haven't actually seen drawings to that detail, and they ordinarily would not be available at this stage in any case.
I'm sorry, there was one about traffic I wanted to.
People asked about what would the impact be of the additional light.
There was a very good question about the light. The current light at Cedar and Carroll, and the proposal to add a second light, and what the impact of this would be on traffic.
Well, we don't know. They haven't done any reasonable traffic study that I've seen on the impact of this light. I would assume that at some point the traffic people will get in there and get serious about figuring out the mechanics. I mean, it's pretty sophisticated analysis to figure out how you put two lights fairly close together so they don't create more disruption than efficiency. So we just don't know.
Did you see anything else, Susan?
Well, there's certainly a lot on.
There are several comments. One is that density is climate friendly and a good thing. Another interesting comment is that both buildings at Maple and Vine are entirely subsidized public housing. I thought this was interesting. So there is public housing in the area.
Mhm.
Anything? Those are the main, did you see anything else?
Yeah, well, here's another question, respective of parking. This is Susan Schreiber. Janet asks, does this mean that Takoma Park will be the only metro station without dedicated parking? This will mean that more people, it could mean that more people will be parking in our neighborhoods and at the ride-on stops, already a problem for some of us. Is this the only, except for downtown stations, is this the only station that will not have parking, Peter?
I don't know that for a fact. Just looking outward, I know at Silver Spring there is parking, whether it's metro parking or private parking, I don't know. I think when you go out further to Forest Glen, there's parking. Wheaton, there's parking. When you go downtown further from here, Fort Totten obviously has a lot of parking. There's a very small lot at Brookland. But yeah, this would be an anomaly with pretty much an anomaly for a station that's not downtown to have no parking at all. Rhode Island Avenue has parking.
All right. Are there any other
Comment.
questions? Yeah, Elizabeth, go ahead.
I hope you're pleased with the increased taxes that will follow when the stormwater, when their stormwater has to be handled by Montgomery County. Any comment about that?
Well, I mean, the stormwater cost of stormwater, I think by and large are covered by the district, by Takoma Park.
Mhm.
The sanitary line is covered by WSSC. I think all of that. I think it sort of begs the question of how aggressive Takoma Park should be in being a participant in this process, given that so many of the effects, stormwater, sanitary, traffic, are impacts here rather than impacts in the district. It's just a peculiarity of the site.
There's a comment, you have to measure the climate-friendly footprint of having new development with the climate-friendly footprint of our current green space and heritage and special trees.
Other questions? I'm seeing things pop up, but I don't.
Right. There is one asking where are our elected officials on this. We can speak to that a bit. We've Historic Takoma and Takoma Stormwater had a meeting with Council Member Fulcher and with Mayor Searcy and several other council members to raise our concerns. To our knowledge, there's been a meeting between WMATA EYA and Council Member Fulcher and Mayor Searcy, but we asked to hear what transpired at that meeting, and we have not heard what was discussed there. We also met with County Executive Mark Elrich, who expressed concern that there should be an environmental impact study done, as well as a traffic study to make sure that there isn't an undue negative impact on the Maryland side. I'm going to be honest, it seems that he was reluctant to do much without first hearing from the mayor and council. So there's going to be a need for us to put some pressure on our elected officials if we want them to follow up and protect our interests, in terms of not having the stormwater problems, the traffic problems,
Okay.
And also having something that is of the proper size and scale for the community.
Jennifer, you summarized that well, but I'd say that the county executive is concerned about the project, but he was very clear that anything that the county does, the only way that the county can get involved is if our elected officials, and particularly our mayor, reach out and contact the Department of Environmental Protection or reach out to him. That will trigger engagement at the county level, but that's a requirement if the county is going to get involved. He made that pretty clear.
Here's another question. What new zoning category should we suggest in order to keep the building shorter so that it would fit in with the surrounding community?
Well, I'm not sure it's a different zoning category so much. It might be MU4, but even if it were MU5, it has a maximum height of 65 feet, which is a lot less than 90. One position would simply be to object to the planned unit development, but not to the zoning per se, because the way that this hearing runs is that it's sort of a package deal. But it is worth kind of, I could take a further look at what the properties are zoned as. For instance, where Busboys and Poets is, I think it might be MU4, but I would need to confirm that.
Another question, are they required to do a traffic study?
They're required to do some level of traffic study. I'm not sure in the district the extent of that study. And it gets in the Department of Transportation, the district, and in Maryland and other places as well, do traffic studies if you're trying to look at a problem more comprehensively. In other words, perpetual development in an area that appears to be clogged up. So they will have to do some, but I don't think they will have to justify that their impact on the area traffic is untenable. So much as whether egress and access from their property is workable.
A question about the presentation. Will these slides and the meeting recording be posted online soon?
Jennifer, you need to unmute there. Yeah, I think she's saying yes.
Okay, that was my understanding too, that they would be put up right away.
There we go. I needed to be allowed to unmute myself. Yes, we're going to we're recording this. So we will be able to share this out in the community again. The other possibility too is that we may be needing to have follow-up meetings as this project moves forward, and as there are opportunities for us all to engage to make sure that we get the development that is going to work best for the community and meet our needs.
A comment that the sewer pipes also run from DC to Maryland at the Metro Park, in addition to the stormwater. the sewer lines.
Right, that's our understanding from the engineering drawings we've seen so far.
I just want to thank Councilmember Gibson for being here this evening. I noticed that he's here to be a part of the conversation tonight. Thank you so much for your attendance. And we hope that you'll be carrying some of these issues forward following this meeting.
There's a question: when this property was dedicated to Metro, was there any idea that WMATA could sell it in the future?
That's a little bit unclear. I could just give you a very brief history of the property. When Metro was planned in the 60s, early 70s, obviously the site was chosen for a station, and they assembled a piece of property that's about 7 acres for that purpose. And the original plan was to build a large parking garage, but it was in the context of a rezoning of the first couple of blocks around Metro for mid-rise commercial, I believe, and a widening of Piney Branch Road to 4 lanes. So at the time, there was a whole different concept of how the Takoma station would function. It would be much less of a community station, much more of a Silver Spring type station. And it couldn't work, obviously, unless you widened Piney Branch Road, made Piney Branch Road something a little bit closer to New Hampshire Avenue, in a sense. None of that happened because of community opposition very early on. So before Metro opened, they had given up on that. And as some sort of a compromise, they built a surface parking lot, but with no clear plan as to what to do with the entire site. However, there's been an ongoing debate for many, many years as to whether Metro committed itself to creating a park in perpetuity. Metro would say that was never the case. They're not in the park business. Some old timers here believe it was the case. So we don't know. But there clearly is, Metro clearly is able to sell excess property, and it's done it in the past and continues to. And they don't see any exception to that rule here.
We have a couple of questions about the support for the project on the DC side, specifically the ANC representative and other officials.
So I don't know that whether Ellen is here tonight. I have a feeling she was not able to attend. Is Ellen here? Because we have had some discussions with DC officials. The commenter is correct that there's a lot of support from DC elected officials to build as big and as much as possible. That is definitely been the tenor of most conversations. But there are, of course, externalities that we who live in Takoma, DC and Takoma, Maryland have concerns about.
Can somebody comment on the heritage trees? What's going to happen to the heritage trees?
Peter, you want me to start on that one? And
yeah, why don't you give it a go?
Okay, so there are quite a number of trees that are going to need to be removed to make room for this development as proposed. The developer is planning to move one of the heritage trees. I don't know what the likely survival rate is for a tree of that age and size, but they're planning to spend significant amount of money to try to preserve one of the trees by moving it. And of course, they will be required to replant some trees after the development is created.
There's a suggestion that those participating should submit comments that request a traffic study and an environmental study.
I think, again, to Susan Schreiber's point, this needs to come from our city government to the county for that to take place.
Apparently, someone comments that WMATA did indeed conduct an environmental evaluation. There's a link that I guess we can explore afterwards to see.
Right.
Okay.
There, if I could just add, there is an environmental assessment part of the background for the WMATA action, which is the action to get rid of the parking as a prelude to selling the property. That environmental assessment is quite weak, if I can say. It looks at environmental impacts very narrowly. The fact that an impervious surface would be removed, and does not consider the broader effects of changes in ridership and impacts of people driving 3 miles further into the city to get on the metro if that's their only option.
A recommendation from Elliot Edelman that we need to ask our Takoma Park Council to ask the county to help. So go forth. Another comment from Peter Kovar that we need to push heavily for a comprehensive traffic study, as opposed to one that is only focused on the impact of this single project, given the hundreds of other units coming online from other projects right now.
Almost 2,000.
Almost 2,000, Susan has commented. There's also a request, could you please restate your suggestion about what to object to in order to keep the building shorter?
I'll start, Peter, but why don't you please join in? I think the issue here is to raise the concern that this would be something that's out of scale with what is currently being built in that area, that immediate area. There's also the concern about the inability of our streets to handle more capacity and more traffic. And then, of course, the issues of what is going to happen in terms of environmental impacts like stormwater. I mean, there are a host of other issues like, light, noise, deliveries. How is the entryways in the development are going to be different. There's going to be a lot more happening off of Eastern and Cedar Streets than currently happens with the WMATA land. So all of that is going to have impacts on the surrounding residential neighborhood and the traffic patterns in the immediate area.
From our council member attending, Randy Gibson, he says, thank you for a good overview of the issues. I support our city's continued engagement to have best results for the city. And I'd like to acknowledge there are people here tonight who, are in favor of the proposal as EYA is laying it down, and that we did not expect everyone to agree here. But these are the concerns that Takoma Stormwater Solutions and Historic Takoma have. We laid them out for you and appreciate your discussion in the chat this evening. There is this desire to have wise development in urban landscapes, and we're not all going to be in agreement here. But I think there are many of us here this evening who want to make sure we have something that's not out of character with what's currently in Takoma. And, so we held this meeting this evening. There is a comment from Ashley. Well, it's a long comment, but basically she's saying there's kind of a trade-off. She thinks that climate-friendly piece is that we need to build homes close to DC and transit in order to protect the environment. Otherwise, people will be pushed farther away. So I'm acknowledging that. And she looks forward to more information about the stormwater issues. Someone said, I'm Jennifer, I don't know if you addressed this specifically. Someone comments, I thought it was illegal to cut down heritage trees. Did you deal with that?
And I don't know that I'm an expert to be able to deal with that. I think that there may be others who know more about the requirements when there's new development.
I
I
understand.
believe they're trying, I'm not sure that they have to remove every one of the heritage trees. I know that there is one they are going to have to move.
Susan, I think, has some knowledge.
I believe that there are 3 heritage trees. Peter could correct me if I'm wrong. And that they will be saving those trees, moving one of them. There are a number of mature trees that may not fit the heritage tree designation, which is a circumference, data. But there are a number of mature trees which will be removed.
There's a question, any idea why the mayor or council members aren't more concerned about this?
Help us out here, Randy.
Well, I could just add one thing as a point of information. The city has been urged to become a party to the zoning commission review of the project, which I believe would be granted because they're adjacent to the site, even though they're in a different jurisdiction. And in past times when this project's come up, and there's been a lot of controversy about the city did get involved. They held hearings, sponsored hearings themselves with the developer, and we're quite active in sort of interacting with WMATA and the developers, the same developer these previous times. So they should not be shy about being engaged.
A comment that the WMATA study just says that there won't be any environmental impacts. So what would it hurt to have Montgomery County do an environmental study? Peter Kovar asked the same question. What would a comprehensive traffic study tell us or solve, and what would the solutions be? Question to the world.
So I can try that one. So, I mean, I think that the solution, which is what we're talking about tonight, is to have a development that is not this large, that something smaller would be more readily, fit into the current landscape there and the current infrastructure. We're really concerned about upzoning that property to something that is more than the region can handle.
Another comment that an earlier iteration of the project at the Metro site approved the sale of EYA, approving the sale to EYA left open the possibility of underground parking. That additional language was added as a result of residents lobbying. We should lobby for that with the WMATA board this time as well. And there's a question for anybody. Why does DC want to support such a large development project? The largest possible.
Well, I think that, we've laid out that there's a desire to have denser development around Metro. There's a desire to have, the revenue, and, the politicians will give their reasons.
a comment. Property taxes in Montgomery County are going up because the zoning bans any real growth in housing. So there are relatively fewer to foot the bill for increased cost.
Sorry, but we're coming.
How about Margo's comment about the deadline?
Why don't you just,
Okay.
Susan has another one.
Oh, yeah. Margot has asked us to talk about the deadline for comments for tomorrow to WMATA. And if you can't pull it off the chat, in the announcement for this program at the bottom are the links for both WMATA's report coming out of the January 17th hearing that they held, and how to write to WMATA, what the address is. Basically, the hearing and their report is very positive, and positive about the elimination of commuter and daily parking. And you can skim the report, which is quite long, or you can simply write to the email address by 5 o'clock tomorrow and talk about anything you're concerned with: parking, the addition of a light, the need for a traffic study. You don't need to tie it to specifics in their report. The important thing is to get comments out. I hope that is what you're asking for, Margot.
You see any other questions and comments?
I don't specifically. There was a reference earlier to the number of other projects that are coming on board. There are, as most everybody who's on this knows, there is the development on Laurel Avenue, which is upwards of, I don't know, between 360 and 400 units right there. Then there are the two developments on Vine and Maple, and on Vine and Maple, and then the one farther on Vine. And then there are the condominiums that NDC is building on the 7-Eleven site. It's a very large number of units. With the addition of this, we're talking about a great many units and a lot of density.
There's a comment that people keep asking what they should say to their council members tomorrow. Could you answer that?
We have written letters to the mayor. We met with, as Elizabeth said, we met with individually the mayor, Councilmember Randy Gibson, Kara Hanzak, Shana Fulcher, Terry Siemens, who else? I can't think now. I think that's it. A couple of other people we've asked, but for various reasons, they haven't been able to meet with us. And Mayor Searcy specifically has been asked to contact the county executive and the county Department of Environmental Protection. And I think the only thing we can do is keep asking, making public comments, bringing this. We're in the midst of the budget season for the council, as people who've been watching and have the patience to watch the discussions. The budget is obviously tremendously important, and it's going to require some special attention to get the attention of the mayor and perhaps other elected officials to take us to get involved in this conversation. They don't have to take a stand immediately. They have to engage. They have to be part of the zoning commission. Just you know, if you can contact the mayor and your representatives, that will be a step in the right direction.
This may have already been talked about, but I'll just repeat it, that when our group met with Mark Elrich, he stressed that the city government had to engage him. He couldn't engage them. So again, it's worth asking them to get Montgomery County involved. There is some sympathy there. I may have missed something, I don't know, but
All right, well, I think at this time, we can, looks as if a lot of the comments and questions are starting to repeat. You know, it definitely, we're glad to have people here tonight to raise the issues, to speak their mind in as to whether or not they oppose or support the EYA development as planned. Again, Historic Takoma is not against development of this land. We're looking for something that is in keeping with the scale and character of the existing neighborhood. We'll be working to try to make sure that we have gotten the environmental impact, the traffic impact studies from that will not deal just with WMATA's transit, but also with the potential externalities of facing the surrounding neighborhoods. So we will be continuing to follow this and to give you opportunities for engagement. And in the meantime, urge you to let your views be known to our elected officials. And thank you for raising them here this evening.
there have been a couple of comments thanking the working group for pulling all this information together. Hopefully we will continue to gather more information.
The other thing that I would suggest is for anyone who is interested, it is a wonderful idea to join Historic Takoma. We provide not only work of this nature in community organizing, but we have programs. We have Takoma Authors series. We have our film presentations. I think many of you may be familiar with, they called him Mr. Lee, and other documentary work that we're doing, and social history that we're conducting here, and the archival work that we do. So would welcome your membership and support for those many different activities that we pursue as Historic Takoma.
And
I just want to say we've had about over 70 people on the call, which is great, and many people making comments. And I actually have been making a list of names, not that we'll be able to contact every person. We won't have necessarily we won't have your emails, but we would love to hear from you. You could write to info@historictakoma.org if you had questions or wanted to make comments. There are a couple of people, iPhone 4 and I think another iPhone, where you haven't registered your names, and if you would do that and make yourselves known, that would be great. But it really is great to have so many people out and engaged, and let's all keep in touch and moving forward and paying attention.
again, thank you for holding this meeting.
All right, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for your engagement here tonight.